You know that feeling on a flight? You look out the window, the ground is rushing up to meet you, and then, boom, a touchdown so smooth you barely felt it. Landing an airplane is, without a doubt, one of the most demanding skills in all of aviation. It's this incredible mix of physics, precision, and pure pilot judgment. So let's pull back the curtain and break down exactly how they do it. There's this classic saying among pilots that just perfectly captures the stakes. It's a bit of dark humor, sure, but it really hammers home a fundamental truth. Every flight has to end back on the ground, one way or another. And that non-negotiable reality is exactly why mastering the landing is at the absolute core of all pilot training. So, with the stakes being that high, how in the world does a pilot approach a runway with confidence? Well, it's not about guesswork or, just hoping for the best. It all comes from a deep, deep understanding of the principles of flight and having a methodical, practiced plan for every single landing. And this right here is the core mindset. A great landing is never a happy accident. It's a totally deliberate, meticulously planned event where the pilot is in complete control, managing the plane's energy, its speed, and its path from miles out, all the way to a full stop. The setup for that perfect landing actually starts long before the runway is even really in sight. It's all about getting on a perfect glide path, a totally controlled, stable descent. But this actually presents a pretty fundamental challenge for any airplane. I mean, think about it. If you point pretty much any vehicle downhill, what happens? It picks up speed. An airplane is no different. To clear obstacles and land right on a specific spot, a pilot needs to come down at a pretty decent angle, but they absolutely cannot let their airspeed run away from them. The answer to this puzzle lies in a brilliant piece of engineering: the flaps. This right here shows you the magic of flaps. When a pilot extends them, they are literally changing the shape of the wing, and this does two absolutely critical things. One, it creates more lift at slower speeds, and two, this is the key, it creates a ton more drag. That drag acts like a parachute for the wings, letting the plane come down steeper without building up all that extra speed. So, in short, flaps are a pilot's absolute best friend on approach. They let you fly at slower, safer speeds, they create that steeper descent we just talked about, and because the nose of the plane can be a bit lower, the pilot gets a much better view of the runway. And all of this together means the plane can stop in a much shorter distance once it's on the ground. So with the flaps doing their job, the pilot can now set up what is arguably the single most important part of a safe landing: the stabilized approach. This just means everything is locked in and constant. The descent angle, the airspeed, the plane's configuration, no last-second wild corrections. Just a smooth, predictable flight path aimed right at a specific point on the runway. And get this, here's the really elegant visual trick pilots use to know they are on that perfect, stable path. They pick a spot on the runway to aim for. Let's say the big numbers painted at the beginning. If they're descending correctly, that spot will look completely stationary in their window. It won't move up or down at all. It just stays put. But what if the approach isn't perfect? Well, the runway itself gives you all the clues you need. If the runway starts to look like it's getting longer and skinnier, like it's stretching away from you, that's the signal that the approach is too steep, the plane is too high, and the pilot needs to correct to get back on that glide path. And on the flip side, if the runway seems to be getting shorter and wider, that's the big visual cue that the approach is too shallow. The pilot's getting too low and probably needs to add a little bit of power to get back up to where they need to be. It's just an amazing use of perspective to maintain that precision. Okay, so the plane is on a nice, stable approach, aiming for the perfect spot. Now we get to the most dynamic, the most skillful phase of the whole thing. Those final few moments from being in the air to flaring just above the runway. We can really break down the whole sequence into 5 distinct phases. We've kind of covered the setup on the base and final approach. So now let's really focus on the most critical parts: the roundout, the touchdown, and what happens after. The flare, or as pilots call it, the roundout, starts when the plane is just about 10 or 20 feet off the ground. The pilot gently, smoothly pulls back on the controls, which raises the nose. This changes the angle of the wing to the air, which gives a little burst of extra lift and dramatically slows the plane's descent. It's this delicate balancing act, trading the last bits of airspeed for a super gentle touchdown. You know, a great way to think about a perfect landing is that the pilot isn't trying to fly the plane onto the runway. They're actually trying to keep it flying just inches above the runway for as long as they possibly can. As the speed keeps bleeding off, eventually the wings just can't generate enough lift to fly anymore, and the plane settles itself gently onto the main wheels. All right, the wheels are on the pavement. You'd think the hard part's over, right? Phew! Well, not quite. The job is far from done. At this moment, the aircraft isn't just a plane anymore. It's a very, very fast ground vehicle that has to be brought under control. This is such a critical safety rule. A pilot has to stay intensely focused and maintain positive control through the entire rollout. I mean, losing control on the ground at 50 or 60 miles an hour can be just as dangerous as making a mistake up in the air. So what does that control really look like? Well, first, they're on the rudder pedals, keeping the plane tracking straight down that center line. They might even keep the nose high for a second, using the whole plane as a giant air brake. Then they gently lower the nose wheel, and only then do they start to smoothly apply the actual brakes to slow down to a safe taxi speed. Of course, not every landing happens on a perfect, calm day. A huge part of being a great pilot is knowing how to manage imperfect conditions, and maybe most importantly, knowing when a landing just isn't working out. So let's talk about the most common challenge, a crosswind. The wind is literally trying to blow the airplane sideways, right off the center of the runway. And if a pilot lands like that, they could seriously damage the landing gear. So they have to use a pretty special technique. It's this really counterintuitive maneuver that takes a ton of coordination. The pilot actually lowers the wing into the wind to stop the sideways drift. But that would normally make the plane turn, right? So at the same time, they use the opposite rudder to keep the plane's nose pointed straight down the runway. They are essentially flying sideways through the air so they can track straight over the ground. They'll even touch down on one wheel first. It's wild to watch. But what if that crosswind is just too strong, or the approach gets unstable for any other reason? Well, the true sign of an expert pilot isn't trying to force a bad situation. It's having the discipline to make the call and execute a go-around. And a go-around is not a failure. It is the safest, most professional decision a pilot can make. And a go-around isn't some panicky, last-second move. It is a totally standardized, practiced procedure. The pilot smoothly applies full power to stop the descent, pitches the nose up into a climb, and then reconfigures the aircraft for flight, cleaning up the flaps and gear in stages, all so they can circle around and set up for a fresh, stable approach. When it all comes down to it, a perfect landing isn't just one single action. It's a whole cascade of hundreds of tiny, correct decisions, from managing energy miles away from the airport to that final, gentle touchdown. It really makes you wonder what other things in our world look so simple on the surface but are actually built on this kind of hidden, practiced mastery.